Hi, people online. Hi, everyone in the room. Thanks a lot for coming to this session about principles, best practices of developing and also the curation of semantic resources. I think why we propose this topic, because semantic technologies has been a long-lasting focus of ECIP. I think has been there for more than 2 decades since the rising up of semantic web ontologies and vocabularies, all those kind of work among the federal agencies and also research institutions. And in the recent few webinars and also meetings within the committee, we see the community interest about how to better organize vocabularies, ontologies, knowledge graphs, and then how to better use all those different technologies. Like, for example, recently, large language models, foundation models, they also just come up, and many people have an interest to know how to better use those resources. So that's why between myself, by the way, my name is Marshall Ma. I'm an associate professor at the University of Idaho. And then between myself, John, you can see him online, and then Ruth in the room, and also Brandon. We said probably we can organize a session for this ECIP July meeting, just to illustrate some of those recent examples, and also not only from the ongoing research projects, but also from some community documents. I know John is leading a document from the Onto Choice community. So for today, we will have a number of presentations. The first one is from John about Onto Choice business, how to better choose terminologies, vocabularies, and ontologies for better usage. And then the second talk will come from Julian Ruff. He is the creator of the MinDat data portal. MinDat has been there for more than, I think, almost 3 decades. Along the years, the data portal has experienced a lot of challenges, not only in violence, financial support, but also the technical upgrades, and then so including the semantic technologies. And because it's not a governmentally supported data portal, it's kind of crowdsourcing data portal. So we believe the experience from MinDat somehow can be useful for the ECIP community. And then Ruth also hoped invite Lico from the OBO Foundry community to give us a talk about their experience of curating the OBO Foundry ontologies and other resources. So we will have 3 talks today. And then I know June and his colleagues in the past months, I think almost years, they have already created a document centered on the Onto Choice community. I paste a link in the Google Doc. So probably for the last half an hour or 30, 25 minutes, we can use that time to discuss the lessons, experience we witnessed from the talks, and also from many other resources. And probably we can use that time to have more discussing and then work on the extension of that document. And finally, that can be a kind of community output, and then we can share it with even broad community about the best practice and the lessons about semantic resources. So that's our plan. Just some logistics. If you just either join the Zoom or entering the room, you can come to, let me see. So if you are using SCAT for the ECIP meeting, you can find the page for our session. And then from there, you can find the shared Google Doc and also the folder for this session. You can find all the PPT slides from each presenter and also the links to some of those resources I just talked about. I probably can switch the shared screen. So let me see. Yeah, I need to stop slide share. Oh, slideshow here. Wait a moment. Okay. So if you come to here, I believe you can find a link somewhere to the folder for today. And then try to locate the folder for our session. Okay. It's the principles for the development and curation of semantic resources. In the folder, you can also find the notes and the agenda for this session. It's in this shared Google Doc. Okay. Yeah, I try to put all those cross links here and there. From the document, you can also access the folder, and from the folder, you can also see the Google Doc. Okay. So there's some logistics. Let me come back to my slides. I can share this again. Okay. So let me first introduce the committee to some of you. I believe many of you have already known this committee for some time. As I mentioned, this is one of the very long-lasting working groups or clusters within ESIP. That's why it's recognized as a committee. Basically, what we do is to promote semantic technologies in support of earth science data discovery, dissemination, and analysis. And along the years in the past, this committee has done a lot of work, including, for example, in the very beginning, the GCMD metadata for the federal agencies, the suite ontology used by many communities, not only in the United States, but also globally. And also in the recent 10 or 5 years, the usage of schema.org for data portals. And also very recently, the coordination of a lot of discussions about the better usage of large language models. But many of them, they also have a relationship to earth science data management and also earth science data analysis. So basically, that's what we do, anything related to semantics and earth science data. But very recently, I became the chair of this committee in 2023. And in the past 2 years, basically between myself, Brandon, and John, we have decided to do the work in a kind of complementary way. So basically, what I did is to coordinate the invited talks for our monthly webinars. And then Brandon did a working group on the suite ontology. And John's role is to coordinate the work on the community ontology repository and also the work on the onto choice and some other things. And because besides the semantic tech committee, within ESIP, we have several other clusters and working groups like semantic harmonization and also soil ontology and informatics and also schema.org cluster. So there are also those collections to among those working groups and clusters, and also between ESIP and also between those individual researchers clusters. We also have a lot of collections with the outside communities, like for example, in AGO, GSA, the IOGS, and also EarthCube, even EGU, there are those kind of collections and collaborations on research and activities. Yeah, as I mentioned, there are those other activities and working groups within ESIP besides our committee. Here is a list of those flyers we have used for the talks in the past year. You can see the interesting trends, and also the diversity of topics we cover. Knowledge graph, like the nowhere knowledge graph, and semantics for data integration in critical minerals, the link ML, and also some work in even other countries, like some things happen in the Canadian Geological Survey. But then in the recent year, I think since the fall of last year, based on the needs from the community and also the requests I received from some community members, we increased the topic of large language models in our coordinated webinars and talks. So here you can see a number of those topics. Here is one in September, actually is from my own PhD student. And this one is from Sky Bristol. He extended the, I think it's wiki base, and then he rescued some data set from USGS and critical minerals, and then built a really interesting portal to explore the knowledge about critical minerals. And then after AGU last year, Dr. Jeffrey Wang from George Mason also gave a presentation about using RAG together with large language models to do better question answering in the oceanographic science. And then in February this year, we had a talk from Dr. John Erickson from RPI about, again, it's about large language model applications. And very recently, we had a talk from Kogan Shimizu from Wright State University. Actually, he will become the next chair of the Semantic Tech Committee, I think starting from August of this year. And in his group, they use large language model to do interactions between knowledge graph and this generative AI. Okay. So that's some activities we have organized in the past year. And all those talks, because ESIP has a YouTube channel, so we organize a playlist and the ESIP channel. So basically all the talks happened in the past 2 years. If you go to this, if you either scan the QR code or you follow the link in the PPT slides, you can find the channel. Because each talk is about 45 minutes. So if you do have an interest in those topics, knowledge graph, application, critical minerals, large language models, you can just go there and take some time to follow those talks. Okay. And as the chair of this committee, personally, I would say I still want to organize more talks. And I hope I have had the time to do that. But still, I think I have missed a number of topics in our webinars in the past 2 years. For example, the work on neuro-symbolic AI, foundation models, and also more work related to word embedding, similarity computation, and how to better use them for data portals. We cover some of those in the past 2 years, but there should be more. And here, I'm going to show you a diagram. It's kind of showing you the trends of the research topics in geoinformatics. Is a work done by one of my postdocs in the past year, and the paper was just published on Mathematical Geosciences. Here on this diagram is business frequency of keywords of all those papers published in a journal called Computers and Geosciences in the past, I think almost 50 years. And each tiny diagram represents the word cloud of 5 years and representing the frequency of keywords of all the papers published in that journal in that 5 years. So you can see a very interesting pattern. For several decades, fortune is the top keyword. And then after, I think about 5 years, around 5 years, internet was on the top. That's between 1998 and 2002. And after, for another, I think 1.5 decades, GIS was on the very top. But then just, I think in the recent 7 or 8 years, the top topic changed again. It became deep learning, data processing, and also machine learning. And we did not check the publication records in the very recent year yet, 2024 and 2025. We did not check that yet, but I believe maybe after another 2 or 3 years, if we come back to create such a word cloud again for the same journal, probably we can see AI, I don't know, maybe large language models or maybe foundation models can be one of those most frequent keywords for the publication in this journal. So anyway, that's the way we track the trends of technologies in the field of geoinformatics. But coming back for exactly this committee, semantics, because for today we want to focus on the resilience of semantic resources. So probably I can pass on to John, and then he can talk about his recent work on the onto choice community. Okay.
Okay, thank you very much. That was a fascinating chart there at the end. I'm totally distracted thinking about that. Yeah. Let's see if this works. Is that the right part of the... Are we seeing my slideshow?
Yep, let me close my slide.
So as Marshall indicated, we've all been doing this quite a while now, and hello to all of you who've joined us for this call. Definitely recognize a few names, familiar names out there who have been on this journey with us. This project, I have some links here if you want to go to any of the particular products, and later we might be visiting the white paper itself at the bit.ly link, AutoChoice-WP. The slides you've probably found, and there are other things to see as well. It's been going on about 5 years now. We'll talk a little bit about that and then get into a little bit of the detailed recommendations. I'm involved with a number of different projects at the moment, about half time with GoFair US out of the San Diego Supercomputer Center. And there we're guiding NIH repositories and others on fair practices, particularly focusing on metadata and vocabularies, and figuring out different ways we can do that. The Onto Choice is a bit of a side project, a personal project, as is the RDA VSIG group co-chair lead. And as Marshall mentioned, I am the repository manager for the ESIP Community Ontology Repository and the MMI ORR. So a lot of different things that lead to putting this together. Some of what we were focusing on for this session had to do with curation, and I wanted to connect the idea of choosing terms and ontologies to curation, starting with just a shout out to the curators who are out there. That I think that's that caring for professional data is heroic work, much in the same way caring for people is, because it can be pretty thankless, but pretty intense and require a lot of expertise and in some cases a lot of boredom too. So I'm all about curation, and there are a lot of use cases that are dependent on being able to find the terms that you would like to find in an ontology or in a collection of ontologies, or to find the ontologies that you want. Some of those are described here, and I'm not going to walk through them all, but we've identified a lot of different kind of use cases that depend upon choosing terms and ontologies, and they're in the four major classes you see on the right side. You're either searching for a term to do something specific or a set of terms to do something, or you're searching for an ontology to use in a specific way, or you're searching for a set of ontologies. So we've broken all those down in the document, and a lot of them, as I say, have to do with the curation process. Now, the question is, how does one choose which ontology to use or which term to use? And the answer I would always give to this is a variation of the one you see here. It depends on different things, your requirements in particular, but it can depend on a lot of other things too. And so I'd get a response that was not all that enthusiastic about that answer because it doesn't really help them, that answer. So I started trying to figure out the real answer, and I couldn't ask ChatGPT back then, 5 years ago, that question, but I did it recently for kicks. And aside from initially getting a little over promotional on projects that I actually worked with or am involved a lot with, which I didn't think, I think someone else might not get that same list. Um, but the summary it came up with wasn't really a bad summary for how to choose terms and ontologies. Um, the two problems it has are is it's not authoritative because it's ChatGPT. And the other problem is that you can go through this and even some of the more detailed information that's in it and still not really have any idea how to choose terms and ontologies. Things like check domain coverage, community adoption, maintenance. Yeah, that's basically what we've come up with too. But what does that mean exactly? So, how do we solve this problem in the AutoChoice project? And I'll just give a little bit of it away by saying we don't exactly solve it. We'll show you what we've done so far. Um, we started by building our answers into a white paper, and the first few years, the we involved was mostly me. Before meetings like this, I'd do a little more work on the white paper, and you may have heard me pitch it once or twice before at meetings like this. But within the last 2 years, a number of people started signing on and really helping out with moving it forward and motivating the work and presenting the work. So I'm pretty sure it'll get mentioned a few times at ICPO this week or ICWG this week. I forget. But it is getting presented elsewhere as well as here. And we're putting out some visual products that will get people's attention and let people know the work is going on. Um, so what impact are we hoping to achieve in a project like this? In the immediate term, we're hoping that a larger community begins working on the project, helps contribute to the completion and publication of the white paper. We're hoping to encourage the development of more and better tools and strategies to evaluate terms and ontologies. If we create a bit of a dictionary or atlas that describes the different ways you can evaluate terms and ontologies, then maybe with those examples, people can start producing tools that match the things that are needed and can start tracking the metadata for ontologies that are needed to let those tools do those evaluations. Um, Finally, we hope we can educate people to better understand what the factors are when you're choosing terms and ontologies and maybe have a systematic way of doing that. So you can see we have quite a few members and these are the things we're thinking about as we meet to talk about this. The gist of our answer looks like this. The gist of our answer looks like there are some basic relevance criteria, a checkbox, if you like, that have to be met. These involve having the right topic and the right terms, um, maybe having a necessary pattern or size to the ontology. Um, Maybe there are community requirements that have to be met. Like the community says, you must use one of these three ontologies. So you have to get through those gates. And then having gotten through those gates, then there are these other criteria that you might evaluate. The criteria about popularity and reuse of the ontology, about the best practices that are applied, maybe the fairness, maybe a quality metric in some way or measurement, and governance and internationalization practices. Does it serve a wide community as maybe an international community with a lot of people in it? Does it have good management policies and practices? All of those are different factors that can be evaluated in parallel, and you could use weights to apply them. And of course, everyone's weights are different in this world. Everyone's going to have different priorities on those factors. Part of what we've done is to build a little chart that lets us say something about the generic weights you might use in considering which of these criteria are the best criteria to use. So this chart that you see is ideally helping visualize the usefulness of each criterion. The criteria are across the top in addressing each use case, a given use case that you might have, like learning what a term means, um, for choosing terms and ontologies. And the darker the green, the more useful the criterion is in addressing that particular use case. So the range is not too wide, but you can see that some like community dictated requirements have an impact for almost all of these use cases. And others, like best practices adoption, may not actually have that big an impact for many of the use cases. So there's a link there. You have access to the slides, I hope, and you can visit this particular heat map. And the first tab on it shows how it's being built and how you can contribute to these rankings if you want by filling out your own tab and your own evaluation of what the important criteria are. So we have a significant chunk of a paper at this point. As you can see from that extended table of contents, it's on the order of 30 pages. If you check out the key, you can tell that the things that are more green or more mature or more done or have more information in them, the things that are yellow need work but have some useful information. The things that are red um, don't really, they have maybe a tiny bit of information, but don't have that much filled out at all. So this is very much a work in progress. It's still open for public contributions of all kinds, and we may do some of those contributions a little later today. It should be that when you go to the actual white paper, you can go ahead and put comments in right away. And if you'd like to make direct edits, that's fine too. You just need to give me your Google um, address, your Google account, so that I can add you to that list. Um, so you can start to see how these categories that we discussed earlier, the relevance group, the popularity and reuse elements, so forth, they break down into more details. And we've tried to make these mutually exclusive so that each one is standing on its own to some degree, but some of them are obviously going to be related, like popularity and reuse are related indicators. Um, and we have a couple of pages written on many of these chapters already. Then toward the end, you start to see more general information. And the one thing here about the LLM status that I note is that, first of all, we're only talking about how LLMs are involved in recommending or choosing terms and ontologies, not how they're used to build ontologies and the like. Um, But I'll also make the maybe controversial statement that LLMs have not been all that good yet, all that useful yet at helping choose terms. They don't understand ontologies well enough yet from everything I've heard so far. Just starting to see some semi-realistic bits of usefulness, I would say. But part of this discussion is hopefully to hear more about that and get references and things like that that'll help us answer that question. And then we have a whole summing up section that includes, okay, what are the overall sort of coolest evaluation facets that you could use? Um, what use cases are we talking about? And that's where you find the heat map that I point to. Um, and everyone would like to have some guidance today that says, how should I actually do this? And so we've started to put together the paragraph where the arrow points about how you would make a selection now by yourself using current tools and not necessarily knowing a lot about ontologies in the first place. Um, it's hard to write this section because the current tools are very limited, in my humble opinion. Happy to hear more. Um, I hope to have a little bit more about how this could go in the future if the system were maybe a little bit better and even in a really good system. And maybe a really good system will end up looking like an AI LLM system. I'm not sure if it will or not. That's to be defined by the future, I guess. Um, So there are a couple of caveats here, and I apologize, I'm not jumping into the chat. I think I may have a minute or two for questions after, and certainly we'll have the discussion period after that. Um, the caveats are we're not really saying how much about how you find the terms and ontologies or about how you create an ontology. Those are other people write about that, and that's great. We don't need to write about that. Um, we aren't talking so much about how AI and LLMs can help with finding and creating ontologies for that same reason. And this is all a voluntary project. And given a finite number of volunteers, we're not going to know everything. And that's where you all can come in and help out. Um, so we discussed the impact we wanted to achieve earlier. Um, and I added here the final great goal would be to have the answer to the question of how do you choose terms and ontologies? And I'd like to have that as an elevator pitch so I can turn all those frowny faces into happy faces. Um, we have a couple of things we're hoping to deliver in the near future. There's a position paper we've started on that's targeted for release in 2 to 3 months that more or less declares what we're doing, what you've heard here, and why it's going to be valuable if it isn't already. We're starting to make presentations. There'll be another one in RDA, and certainly some presence of some form or another at both ISWC and ICBO. There's a prototype tool that Henny McGinty's lab at Kansas State is working on. It's not to have a whole large number of metrics, but some exemplar metrics. And I, in particular, would like to see a lot more content in the white paper. So how do we do this? Those of us who can meet every other week for an hour or less. We each contribute to the best of our abilities. So different people are doing different kinds of things. If you want to be a named author, then you actually have to have contributed explicitly to the white paper. Um, but you can contribute without being a named author, and it's not hard if you want to contribute to the white paper. And we have all the usual associated technology stacks lined up and in use for our group to work on. Um, the logo is our next big achievement in that department. And in fact, you can see the choice of logos on your screen, and feel free to throw into the chat your favorite logo selection. So I have, I'll come back to that. I have some questions in the slides. I'm not going to go over these now, but you can be mulling over these during a break, whenever you like. And then I added the humor in the form of my favorite related XKCD strips. There are only 4 of them that are related, so it was easy to choose. So thanks very much for the time to present that. And I'll leave it to Marshall to manage the questions.
Yep. Thanks, John. We have time for any questions or comments. Yeah, Matt.
Thank you. So Matt Harrison, I'm now with AWS, but I spent 25 years working in the British and French geological surveys, contributing to things like this. You, in one of those final slides, you kind of answered one of my questions around kind of the connections with what's happening in RDA around ontologies. But something that I haven't seen, and Marshall knows about this as well, is kind of in terms of the implementation of a lot of these ontologies and building knowledge graphs. Then there's the Deep Time Digital Earth project that's happening funded out of China that has a link to IUGS, CGI, etc. Have you explored any of the work that they've done? They've done the biggest job I've seen so far of trying to integrate existing ontologies and use them in anger, which has always been one of my frustrations as the director of informatics in two big European geological surveys, was the fact that nobody was using many of these wonderful ontologies that have been built.
Yeah, I do not. I'm not familiar with that project. I don't believe. If it's possible to put a link in the chat or get it to Marshall so we can capture that, that would be great. Or directly in the document is fine also. And yes, that it will. I think there will end up being different use cases for how that kind of an aggregation is used versus how individual ontologies or ontology collections are used. But I'm very eager to see how they're attacking that problem. As you say, it's a huge challenge to work with a lot of ontologies from different sources in any sort of systematic way. It's all but impossible without a whole lot of development. So good to know about that resource.
Yep. Thank you both. And then in the chat box, I saw Lico pasted two links. I think it's also about some ontology usage and ontology choices from the OBO community. Lico, do you want to add any comments on that?
Yeah, thanks. So yeah, we actually created some resources kind of on a similar topic, John, a few years ago. So the OBO Academy, I'm actually going to talk about it a little bit in my slide deck, but it's an open online training materials and resources for ontology development within the OBO Foundry. And we do have a couple of pages I pasted in that focus on kind of selecting ontology terms, very focused and biased towards the OBO Foundry. So, and I'm not quite sure if the OBO Foundry has ontologies that are necessarily relevant to this community, but I think this could be a good resource for this group that's working on this position paper to see what kind of overlap we have between what content you have and what we have in what we've described before. I think there's probably a lot of overlap, but maybe there's some additional topics that could be incorporated into the paper. So I think this could be a useful resource for folks to look at. I love this work that you've done, John, and everyone. This is really very, very cool.
Thanks. Appreciate that. Yeah, I have referenced some of and made use of some of that content already, but there's also very recently, within the last 3 months, I've seen 3 or 4 other relatively new similar kinds of guidance that have come out that I need to figure out how to incorporate sort of on the fly here. So it's starting to emerge as an ongoing question, I think.
Yeah, it's great.
Your stuff was great, if I may say so. That was great content.
Thanks.
Yep, great. So, thanks again, John, for your presentation. I think we can move on to our next talk. It's given by Julian Ruff, the creator of the MinDat data portal. So his talk is more from the perspective of the experience of a data portal, including all those lessons learned and also challenges and how he and his colleagues address those challenges in the past decades. Okay, Julian?
Right, thank you, Marshall. Yes, obviously, this is something that's a little bit different. Let me just get my slides running. Bear with me a second.
So do you have a physical background of those shelf of mineral species, or
Yeah, these are my
Okay.
some of my minerals there. Yeah, that's
good.
Right. Okay, so you should be able to see that if I can. Where's the play button? It's up here. Isn't it? Right. Okay, there we go. Okay, right. Is that you can see the screen, slide full screen now?
Yes.
Good, good. Okay, right. So yes, so I'm here to talk about mindat.org. Now, for those of you who don't know mindat.org, Mindat is the world's largest database of mineralogical information, which covers mineral species, mineral varieties, but more importantly, the localities that they come from. So it is a massive database of information, plus also photos. We've got well over 1 million photos of minerals from around the world. Let me go into a very brief history because it's been going for quite some time, as Marshall hinted earlier. It actually started as a personal project of mine to build a mineral locality database from information that I had, and the original idea was that it was going to be a tool that I could use to help me go out and find minerals. And I would just be able to keep track of all of these different references of things that were found in different places. So I actually built a DOS-based application. Actually, it was a C-based portable application. I've also compiled it for the Commodore Amiga back in the day. But 1992, Christmas Day was when I started it. And at that time, it was just for me. It was my own personal project. So of course, all the data entry was done by myself as well. So 1995, I decided it would be quite good, having just received Windows 95, if I could turn this into a Windows application, which I did. And obviously it was a lot more pretty, but still it relied on the information was only entered by me. And maybe 95, 96 was the very earliest time of the internet. And I started giving copies away of this application to other people. And I was very proud when I had about 6 or 7 people worldwide using it. But still, the information was only entered by me. Now, I found an old to-do list that I had in my project docs here from 1996. And I'll read out what it says. 8, HTML export. This is a longer term goal. I'd like to be able to export HTML from Mindat32, and then eventually it could be possible to convert Mindat32 into a web server. So it could be run on a PC connected to the internet, allowing anyone with a web browser and internet account access to the latest mineral information, and possibly write access to add information to a global database. That would be great. So this was 1996 that the seed idea of that happened. Unfortunately, life got in the way and I never got around to it until 2000, when this idea came back to me and I decided, okay, I've really got to do something with it now. So in October 2000, I launched the first version of the mindat.org website, and this did allow other people to add information to the database. And I'll talk a little bit about how that is all managed in terms of how the data works. And so from 2000 to 2014, this was a privately owned website owned by me. So ultimately I was in charge of everything and I made all the decisions. But in 2014, I donated the entire project to a non-profit foundation to allow us to basically ensure the longevity of Mindat, because it had got far too important by this point. So since 2014, it has been run by the Hudson Institute of Mineralogy. I'm still involved on a full-time basis to maintain and run the site. So let's talk a little bit about the finances of Mindat. Sorry, bear with me a second. I've just lost something here. Right, yeah, okay. So how do we get a site that has been running since online since 2000? And I do like to point out that we launched a collaborative community database site the year before Wikipedia. How do we keep it running all this time? We've been running now, we're celebrating our 25th anniversary in October. Well, basically, there are various aspects to this. So in terms of funding, we have up until very recently, very specifically for the API project, we've not had any academic or government funding whatsoever. Everything has been self-raised. We have had donations. We have essentially sold page sponsorships. So individuals can sponsor their favorite mineral or their favorite locality for now I think it's like $80 a year or $70 a year. And we've had fundraising auctions. We've had items, often mineral specimens, of course, donated to us that we can sell to raise money. And some of those have been very successful. And in 2014, one of my good friends, who was also one of the managers of Mindat, died. And he left a very significant part of his estate to Mindat. And that has been a very significant reason why we're still going, is because of what he's given us. But essentially, we are self-sufficient. We have been self-sufficient for 25 years. And whilst there are a lot of things that we would like to do that we probably can't afford to do at the moment, we do pretty much have things under control in terms of keeping the site alive. We're not worried about the next 2 or 3 years. We're looking, okay, what's going to happen in 10 years? That's probably not a bad situation to be in. So that's the positive thing. Now, how also the next issue is controlling expenses. Now, this has come out of necessity, particularly when it was a project that I built on my own. It was done in my free time. I couldn't afford to do much. I remember at one point we needed a new server, and I went out and literally just got the cheapest PC I could and put some big hard disks in it, and that worked for several years. We had hosting donated to us by friends in the early days. And I put down here, avoiding the cloud, and I do apologize to the AWS people who are here. But yes, we cannot afford to run the cloud for Mindat. We've looked at the figures for it, and it just is not possible. And the main reason for that is because of the cost of actually providing the pages to people. So we run our own servers and we have them hosted, and that gives us a fixed monthly cost, regardless of how many people are trying to access a site. If I've got my services hosted on the cloud, traditionally, and I know there are different options for this. If somebody, for example, decides they're going to set up a botnet in China to scrape our site, which they do, causing us a lot of problems. Not only is it going to cause problems, but we will be paying for the privilege of them stealing our content. So the cloud does not work for us with the current models of the cloud for hosting Mindat. Hence, we now have a 3-server setup in California. We've literally just moved to 3 servers this year. Before the beginning of this year, we have been running for 24 years on a single machine. So that involved a lot of tricks, a lot of optimizing, making things run for what is a very popular website. So we developed a lot of in-house skills. We had to figure out a lot of problems ourselves, how to stop the database from stalling, how to ensure that we optimize things, how we do like 5 different levels of caching to make sure that we are sending out pages as optimally as possible. And obviously, we need to plan for the future. And so we're now not just looking at what money we have now and what we can spend. We're also looking at, okay, well, how are we going to make sure that the money that we do have lasts for as long as possible? So we are still actively trying to keep as lean as possible and still providing the service. Now, there's an interesting side effect to this, and that is that if we went to the cloud, one of the things, or if we spent more money in general on hosting, we would absolutely be able to get more reliable systems. We would be able to get rid of the downtime that we've had. And it's not been too bad this year with the new servers, but we have had times where the site's been unresponsive, particularly when we've had these Chinese or wherever it is, it's not always Chinese, bot attacks that have been causing us these issues. And so, yes, we could spend more money on that infrastructure and we would have less downtime. But the flip side to that is we found that whenever we've had downtime, the following day we've had a spike in donations. So is it really worth us reaching for those levels of accessibility on the site? Now, obviously, we don't want to just sort of, we've joked in the past about, oh, well, we should turn off the site for a day, a month, just to remind people how important it is. But no, we want to try and make the site as reliable as possible. We want to have as many people using the site reliably without problems as we can. But we also have to understand that if we're going to be, if it's going to cost us twice as much to have a more reliable system, is it worth that expense? And so far, the answer has generally been not really. So yeah, that's the issue of expenses. I saw there was a question that's popped up in the chat or comment. I will get to that a little bit later. Right, so community standards. So this project is somewhat unlike a lot of projects in that we basically run things ourselves. We have a management team of about 50 people, 50 experts, who the initial ones were appointed by me. And that happened in the early days when I first launched the site. I'm not a professional mineralogist, so I was just doing this for fun. And I had a lot of people who were very much more academically qualified in mineralogy than I was, emailing me to say, you've done this all wrong. And I said, well, will you help me? And they said, yes, of course. So what happened is it's these first people who complained became the first advisors, basically the management team that helped build the site. And so now we have over 50 experts from around the world, all experts in different fields related to mineralogy, who help us to run the site. Now, in terms of decisions like, for example, our ontologies, so this means that we can react very rapidly, because all that we need to do is we have decisions within our management team, and we will have a discussion. Sometimes it will be over a day or 2 days about some issue, if it's not a major one, and then we'll just implement it. It will be done. We don't have to have, in the majority of cases, a lot of long-term discussion over things. So we've been very effective in moving rapidly in making things happen on this, which I think has actually been to our benefit. And there are certainly times where that backfires and we've had to take a step back, but generally we've been moving forward more often than we've been moving backwards on that. So in terms of the standards, obviously everything has to align to our core mission, our building this database of reliable mineralogical information. And bearing in mind, when it was all started, reliability of information was not my key issue. My issue was simply just to grab everything I could and put it into a database. So over the years, we have become more and more focused on the quality of information. And so right now, one of the things that we've been trying to do is do a lot of data cleaning. And we have experts, not just the 50 managers, but we have regional experts as well beyond that, who have limited power to clean up information in their regions. And so slowly things are getting more and more accurate. It's not like Wikipedia. It's not that everyone can edit. Everybody has to be vetted. And for 90% of contributors who are not these regional experts, their information then has to be approved by one of the experts before it will get entered in fully into the database. But still, there is quite a big crowd of people now working on this. So educating the community is extremely important in terms of how to grow what we're doing. We need more people to contribute. We have a lot of issues to do with bias in our data. The places that people are interested in get a lot of work. The places where we do not have anyone who's interested in tend to get neglected. So deliberately trying to go out and find people who are capable of providing information about the areas we have gaps in, whether it is an area of scientific knowledge in a particular area of mineralogy, or more usually a geographical area of we don't have anyone, for example, in Cambodia or whatever it is, that we would need to find someone who is capable of helping us with that area. So educating the community in all respects, in terms of bringing up amateurs. A lot of them are amateur mineral collectors, for example, making them understand the scientific rigor that we now have in terms of entering information. And hopefully they'll learn a little bit more about the science of it as they're going along, in terms of providing what they are wanting to share with us. And obviously this all ties into what I was saying earlier in terms of improving the overall accuracy of the site. Inclusivity and representation is very important to us, as I mentioned, both in terms of geographical representation, but also in terms of the entire community. And that includes younger people who may be interested in mineralogy, who want to share information or who want to get involved in some way. One thing I've been very keen on is trying not to just sort of step on people and say, no, that information is not important, or your photo of your amethyst is not good enough. And try and ensure everybody who's starting off feels that they have a place and that they can get involved at some level on the site. So those things are all extremely important to us. So final thought, as we talk about that was the final thought here. I've always said the more people who use your data, the greater the chance that someone will find a way to keep you running. So become essential, become critical to other people, and your chances of survival long-term become that much better, even regardless of what field you're in. And this is why, for example, it was very important to us to open up our data, to build the API, to allow others to use the MinDat data in multiple ways that we would have never dreamed of using it. Yeah, obviously, I think nowadays everybody is pretty much thinking the same things in terms of wanting their data to be used by as many people in as many ways as possible. But it's also a matter of trying to understand, who could benefit from your data, that who may not know about it, you may not understand what they're trying to do. So there is obviously the FAIR principles need to be. You need to go through these with great detail to understand what you're trying to do, and ensure other people know it. But yeah, keeping the site running has been a challenge for 25 years. I think that we're going to be carrying for a few more years yet, and my job now is to ensure that that carries on for a very much longer time. So with that, questions, please, and I will go back to what that was in the chat, and see if I can scroll up and see those. Let me just stop the screen share for a second.
Thanks, Julian. Yep, we do have time for questions and comments. Yep, John, go ahead. You're muted, John.
Thank you. Sorry for that. Really loved the talk, and congratulations on 25 years. Having kept the MMI site up more or less for 20 years, more or less on my own, a lot of what you're saying resonated a lot. Can you give an idea of what your current budget is, and how, once you started having some kind of budget to work with in the early days, how you prioritized the different directions you could go?
Right. Well, that's actually a very good question. And in the so certainly for the first 15 years of running the site, the budget was it all came out of my pocket. It was an expensive hobby. That's what
Yes.
it was.
Yes.
And I would occasionally get donations at that point that helped me offset things, but it really was funded by myself, more or less. Now things are somewhat different now. Because in 2013, I was doing contract work up until that point, and I was very fortunate to be working with someone who gave me time off to do Mindat things. And when I was taking more time off doing Mindat things than actually doing the work, I thought, okay, this is silly now. I probably should just bite the bullet and quit. So I decided to quit the day job and work full time on Mindat. At that time, I had no idea how the money would be raised. Now we have the budget that we have at the moment is around about $130,000 a year, that sort of amount. Now, right now, we're not bringing in that amount in donations. We're getting a sizable amount, but we are still reliant on the money that we have in reserves from the estate of Rock Courier, who died in 2014. But we still have, there's enough there that we can coast for 10 years if we don't have any more money coming in. So obviously what I'm looking at the moment is building a longer term survival plan for that. And there's certainly other things we would like to do. We would like to have more people working full time on the site. We would like to have more, there's more things to do with, for example, digitization projects that we would like to be involved in on doing. We have the opportunities that we've got that we know are there that have been around for years, but we do not have the budget to do them at the moment.
Great, thank you. Really good.
Thanks, Julian. Thanks, John. Any other comments or questions? Matt?
Matt Harrison, AWS. So have you heard of the Open Data Initiative, that is data that is hosted by AWS for free and accessible for free?
Yes. Now, I can't say I know a lot about it. We have gone through some of these options, but I think we did look at open data last year when we were looking at various cloud options before we built our new servers. And we figured at the time it was not viable. Probably the main reason is legacy code. We have all of our code is basically PHP code, and it didn't appear that there would be an easy way of moving what we're doing onto a cloud system. Now, then that may be that we're wrong on that, and it might be that you've got some great ideas about how we could. And certainly, I'm always interested to talk about these things. I'm very happy to discuss them. And obviously, and we have talked in the past as well with the deep time digital data people in China as well. And so there have been things that we have been dealing with, but and looking at on that. But right now we are comfortable with our current setup. I wouldn't say that it is the only thing that we would want to do. We probably would like to have some kind of cloud system in the future, but it might be that we split things off and maybe have, for example, the photo library, which is probably the largest part of it in terms of data size, keep that out of the cloud for cost reasons, and keep the and put the database, the rest of the database in the cloud. That could work.
Let's have a talk. So I put my contact details in the document for the meeting in relation
Okay.
to deep time digital.
All right.
That's fine.
So I'm just jolien@mindat.org, so you can get to me anytime. But yeah, let's talk. That'd be great.
Thank you both for the discussing. Yeah, I guess we are now at the time to move on. Thanks again, Joanne. So, Liko, you can probably share your screen, and then the floor is yours.
Great, thank you. All right, so I'm going to talk to you today about the work we've done in the Obo Foundry to manage interoperable ontologies. So yeah, we were asked, there was a request for someone from the Obo Foundry to come and speak to you all today about kind of our governance and strategies for, sorry, there we go, for how we manage our interoperable ontologies in the Obo Foundry. So I think we all are on the same page with why we need ontologies, that they provide standardized terminologies for us to annotate our data and increase the ability to integrate it and harmonize data sets. And also they enable data to become findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable, and facilitate search and discovery, as well as support computational analyses. But having ontologies in general is great for standardizing information, but the need to have them be interoperable and how to kind of manage this amongst the community is definitely a challenge, and something I think that the Obo Foundry does a really great job with. So in case you're not familiar with the Obo Foundry, this is a community of ontology developers. It's the Open Biological and Biomedical Ontology Foundry. And it's a community of ontology developers. And we're committed to building interoperable ontologies that are where we build them under a guiding set of shared principles. And we commit to these principles and build these ontologies that are utilized, and they're open ontologies that are utilized by the broader community. So it's a volunteer-run community that consists of hundreds probably of people. We have a guiding Obo operations committee where there's probably like, I want to say probably 30 or so of us on the Obo operations committee on a volunteer basis. So the community really drives the operations committee, and the operations committee, we try to oversee the kind of work, the tasks that need to be done on like a day-to-day basis. We have kind of a Obo governance group that helps us kind of define some of our tasks and how we work together. And then we also have some sub-working groups within the Obo Ops Committee, including an outreach group, which kind of is everybody on the group as part of the Operation Committee as part of the outreach. We have a technical working group who build a lot of our tooling that we use and maintain some of our tools and things, and I'll show you some examples of those. And then we also have an editorial working group, which is responsible for keeping the principles up to date and revising them as needed. We do have, it's open, the community is open to everybody. We do kind of have a bit of an onboarding process if anybody wants to join the operations committee, and a certain level of commitment is needed to participate in the ops committee. But I think anybody's welcome to inquire about joining that. It's not a closed group. It's our meetings, I believe, are now open to, and the minutes are open for people to look at. We do have a mailing list, which I certainly encourage everyone to join, and a Slack group, which I would actually encourage the SOC group is really, it's not overwhelmingly it's not overwhelmingly used, but there's a lot of good discussions on there. And it's a really great place if you have questions about how to use ontologies, or there's like a protege channel for protege related questions. We have people who are experts on building and maintaining that tool. So we have people who are experts on maintaining a lot of the OBO Foundry tools that we provide. It's a really the SOC is a really great resource for communicating, for connecting with community members and getting questions answered. A lot of extremely intelligent people on there with a lot of expertise that are willing to help others and share information. So so yeah, thinking about how to build an ontology and an interoperable ontology, and what are some success stories that we've had with building ontologies in a community-based manner, and how have we been successful at kind of governance and community-related activities. So this is an example, a true story of a use case where, so we have an example of an ontology, Uberon. Uberon is the Uber anatomy ontology. It was started in 2009, so it's been around for quite a while, where we had some people come together with a common use case. We have David Asimi Sutherland here on top, Chris Mungle, and Melissa Handel. The three of them were working on anatomy-related projects, and there was a lot of other existing anatomy ontologies that were available that covered species-specific anatomical entities. And they came together and realized that they had a use case where they needed to have kind of a unified cross-species ontology. And they were jokingly calling it, saying, oh, this is an Uber ontology, an ontology that covers all the anatomical entities across different species. And then that kind of stuck, and that's why it's called Uberon. So we have this use case where this group of folks, they had a need to build this ontology. So this ontology, they started working on this and building this. And then over time, other groups became stakeholders and contributors. There's other specific groups that had needs to use anatomy ontologies for their specific projects. Like David, Chris, and Melissa are co-PIs for the Monarch Initiative, and then another group, Fioscape, is using Uberon. So then there's need for coordination between the different needs in these different groups. And then as time goes on, in the particular case of Uberon, and just as of a few years ago, there's a lot of different projects that are using Uberon for mapping anatomical terms for their data sets, like Monarch and Fioscape, and then now the Mouse Genome Informatics group is using it, Human Cell Atlas, Firebase, etc. This is not a complete list, but this is an example of a lot of different groups who are now using this single ontology for their purposes. And we have, and this kind of demonstrates the need that we need to collaborate on these individual ontologies, because we come at this from different perspectives with different needs. Like Monarch users might have specific terms they want to use, but they may not make sense for their purposes, or Human Cell Atlas may come and say, I need some specific terms that are not available. And then maybe a particular user from another project might start questioning, and is the way this term is modeled and represented the proper way to do this? Is this actually apply to the species that are in here? So a lot of questions, and in particular the use cases, will come up. So, and not only that, but our ontologies may depend on other ontologies too, which amplifies our need for collaboration. So Uberon is used, staying with the use case of Uberon, Uberon is used by a lot of different other OBO ontologies. Like it's used in the cell ontology for saying that the cell is located in a particular tissue, or it's used in the Mondo disease ontology to say, this is a disease of a particular anatomical entity, like breast cancer, or like a neurological disease that occurs in the brain. So we often have needs where someone else is using this ontology to incorporate into their other ontology, or using it for their specific data annotations. And sometimes there's a need where we need terms from these ontologies, or we need other ontologies to fix stuff. Like, for example, I think it was in Mondo where we were getting some incorrect classifications of disease entities, disease terms, because of the way Uberon was modeling a particular anatomical entity, where a disease was being classified as a type of like connective tissue disease, when that wasn't actually truly the case, and in the perspective of a clinical physician. So yeah, there's a lot of need for us to be able to collaborate and work with each other. And I like this slide. This demonstrates kind of how these ontologies are intertwined with each other. So say we're annotating information about gene information, like specific genes, and the way the ontologies are kind of built and represent different domain areas, there's always connections to each other. So we need to ensure that the representations are scientifically accurate, which is one of the underlying principles of the OBO Foundry. So we can see all these relationships between these entities and how really truly dependent they are on each other. Like where we have like a particular gene can be involved in a particular disease, and the disease can have a phenotype that also affects a particular anatomical entity. So ensuring all these pieces are represented scientifically correctly is really critical. And it really is dependent on the community to be able to ensure this is done properly. So in order to coordinate, we really need effective collaborative workflows. And I think one of the other successes of the OBO Foundry has been that we recognize that there's really not a single person who is going to be an expert in all of these areas. And we have amongst ourselves, amongst the OBO Foundry, we have people who have expertise in the technical aspects, and we have people who are expertise in the domain, specific domains, and we have people, and sometimes we work with members of the community where they're experts in like the clinical aspects or the medical aspects that not every, it's almost impossible to find someone that has the expertise and understanding all of the computer science, underlying logic, the particular domain. So we kind of need to be able to work together and collaborate in order to be successful at doing what we're doing. So going into a little deeper about the specific guiding principles for the OBO Foundry. I won't go through all of this in detail, but just give some highlights. So we are, like I said, we're committed to developing ontologies under these shared guiding principles. These are the current principles that we have right now, but not 16 because we're missing a few here. So there's about 13 principles here that we kind of abide by, and adhering to these principles helps make our ontologies interoperable so we can utilize them with each other, use them like building blocks where we can define terms using other external ontology terms. Committing to things like all the ontologies are open, so they have open source licenses. We build these under a common format using the web ontology language OWL. We have a URI specification for how to give assign identifiers to the terms. We have principles such as like every term should have a textual definition. The relationships between the terms are defined using an ontology called the relations ontology, and so on. So this is all documented on the OBO Foundry website if you're wanting to see more details. And in addition, we have a lot of different kind of tooling and tools and resources in our ecosystem. For example, we have the robot ontology development automation tool, which is developed as part of the OBO Foundry kind of resources. This is a kind of a template that can be used for kind of automatically adding new terms to the ontology. It's a quick method that can be used in place of something like Protege. We also have the ontology development kit, which kind of specifies the way we set up our repositories using GitHub. And it's super useful because every OBO Foundry ontology is now set up using the ontology development kit. So if you go to a GitHub repository for any given OBO ontology, the kind of format and layout of the repository is set up the same with the same kind of tooling and like continuous integration, like checks and such. So it makes it really easy to view and to contribute to the different ontologies. We also have a dashboard for quality control. So this is the ontologies are kind of judged if they're following the principles that we've laid out. And the members of the OBO Foundry operations technical team, they created this dashboard so you can go to your ontology that you work on or ontologies and see how well you're complying with the principles. And then, yeah, I already brought up a little bit about OBO Academy, and I'll tell you more about that briefly. So yeah, this is what our dashboard looks like. So on the left-hand side, we have a snapshot of a few of the ontologies that we have in OBO Foundry. I think there's a couple hundred now. And then each of the rows along the top is one of these specific principles. So then you get like a green check box, a green check if you are compliant with the principle, red if you're not compliant, and then the yellow and the blue are somewhere in between, like a warning or needs more information. So it's kind of rare where every ontology complies with every aspect of the all the principles. Like for example, like definitions. I know it's hard. A lot of ontologies may lack a definition of every single term that's in the ontology. So that's one of them. It's a little more difficult. And then they have an overall kind of rating, like how compliant are you with the principles. And the owners of these ontologies have all been notified, and they have the opportunity to try to get their ontology into compliance. But yeah, it's not, the expectation isn't really to have every single thing in compliance. That's a little bit challenging. But that's just kind of a quick view of where the ontologies are that we have in our Foundry. And then, yeah, it's a few years ago, we were able to start the Obo Academy, an online resource for training materials. Prior to Obo Academy, we had a lot of training materials and documented kind of workflows that were dispersed throughout the different groups. Like So Ontology had developed some materials, or Go had a lot of documentation on how they do their editing, and Gene Ontology, Go. And then with we had an opportunity, myself and some of my colleagues, to develop some training materials for as a consulting contract for some staff, and then we were able to take the training materials that we made for the specific use case and turn them into this open website. So the Obo Academy, I've already put some links in the chat. This is a freely available online training materials which we put together to try to kind of divide up, to try to bring together all those siloed materials that we had, the existing materials, and then also we've been iterating on it and building new training materials over time. And this was first started in 2021, so it's been several years now, and everybody's welcome to contribute to it. So it's on GitHub. This is a make doc site or read the doc site, but the backend is GitHub. So if you just go onto the site and click on this little edit button here, it'll take you to the GitHub repo. And as long as you have a GitHub account, you can go in and you can do pull requests to make request changes or create new pages. I think there's even, if you search, the search bar works really well. If you search in there, or there might be a link somewhere on the kind of directory that takes you to how to, they have templates for creating new pages. So this is really for anyone to go in and create new documentation, revise documentation, or to view the documentation. There's a lot of lessons in here that are meant to be kind of self-guided. And yeah, these are a lot of the examples in here are built on like Obo examples, or a lot of them come from the Mondo disease ontology, because I contributed a lot to this content, and we just reused a bunch of documentation we had from Mondo as examples. So, but yeah, it'd be great to get contributions from other communities outside of what were the ontologies that we work on specifically. It's great to have more examples. But yeah, there's a lot of great content in here, and it's really open for anybody to use and to contribute to. So yeah, I'll wrap up here. Yeah, I hope everybody's enjoying Seattle. Those of you who are there in person, I'm just down, 200 miles down the freeway in Portland, Oregon. So I know you're all having nice weather there, because we're having nice weather here too. And yeah, this is, like I said, Obo Foundry is an open community. We have a mailing list in the Slack group, and we have our different committees. But yeah, for me, it's been a great positive experience working amongst this community of highly collaborative folks. And I think there's been a lot of success in what we've done here. And I think a lot of it comes down to just really people are willing to work with each other and take the time. Like I said, it's all volunteer as well. So it's been very fruitful and great opportunity to get to know all these wonderful folks. Yeah, so thank you for having me, and thanks for listening. And I'm happy to take questions. I think we just have a few minutes left in the session.
Okay. Thanks so much, Liko, for the presentation.
Yeah.
Do you have any comments or questions for Liko? Either from the room or people online? Great. Yeah, just a comment from John. Okay.
Yes, it's a great community. I agree.
So thanks again, Liko. We
Yes.
have about 5 minutes left. I know, John, you already have a draft for the right paper. And also the community of Onto Choice, you already have the draft. So probably you can just call for a contribution from people online for this session and also people in the room, just to see like for which part you specifically need more contribution for extension, refinement, or any new input for people.
Thanks. Yes. I think these questions are the ones that came to mind because they're the ones that I'm least able to answer or imagine an answer, conceive of an answer in producing the paper. And so it would be great if people wanted to put their notes in the notes of the session or directly into the paper or email me, any of the above. Or yeah, throw in any comments into the chat before we go. If you have opinions about answers to these, we're really trying to aggregate the existing knowledge, as it were, about all of these different topics that are covered in the paper. So hopefully we can become a reference of the Oboe Foundry in time for some of the same questions that they're addressing. And yeah, if I don't know if there's anything else I need to say or ask. Yeah, Nicole, that would be great to get your article about which OLM to choose, especially if it's about choosing terms of ontologies.
Yeah, I don't think it was about that, but
Oh,
more general.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So I was very curious too, because I was like, I've just been using ChatGPT because it's the first one I became familiar with, but I know
Yeah.
people have a lot of preferences.
I want to ask you a general question and a specific one of Oboe Foundry. The general question is there anyone who has successfully used any AI LLM to actually help them choose either ontologies or terms?
Chris Mungle is really hot for using AI tools right now, and he's trying to develop methods for helping add new terms to the ontology. I don't know of a use case of determining which ontology to use, but I've actually been working on doing some curation and mapping, and I noticed when I ask it questions, it'll bring up the cell ontology. But if I ask it to do mapping for me, it's super wrong. They'll just give me a term that makes sense with a completely wrong ID, and I'm like, what?
Right.
This is
Yeah,
like,
it'll give you an answer
yeah,
that parses.
yeah,
And
yeah.
he recommended Curate GPT as
Hmm.
an ongoing project, which I started to play with,
Hmm.
but only so far with the web service, which isn't really ready to be played with very much yet. So it's there. I've seen a lot of positive papers, which it turned out have been very narrow and not something that the general public could use or
Hmm.
general technologists could use. They actually require a lot of care and feeding. So
Yeah.
I grant his excitement and have not seen credible examples of actual tools that can be used.
Yeah. I think we'll get there, but we're maybe not there yet. But it was Chris that shared this article. I'll find it and I'll put it in the
Lovely.
Google Doc.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Great.
Great. Yep, I think we're out of time. So thanks again to all our presenters and also all the audience for the presentations and the active discussing. We can wrap up the session at here. Hope you enjoy the rest of the meeting. And now it's time for a coffee break.